Hey friends, the beautiful thing about a good worldview is it helps you navigate reality. Reality is an important word. It means like the way things are. It's objective. It is God-given. It's God-created. And when we align ourselves with reality, with God Almighty, with the truth of the Scriptures, we find that our lives flourish, that we make sense out of life. We're able to navigate this journey through life. It's very, very important. This is why stuff like gender and things like anti-Semitism and the hatred of other people, there's a host of other issues, are critically important to look at through a biblical worldview lens. We're going to talk about that today in our podcast and how the Christian worldview helps bring unity and blessing to all of us. I think you'll really enjoy it.
Hey, welcome to the Ron Johnson Discipleship Podcast.
Glad you can join us on this beautiful Thursday morning. We've got so much to talk about. As always, things are happening at such a furious clip. We can barely keep up, but we're doing our best. We're doing our best to try. Yeah. We ended last episode talking about Gavin Newsom's launch of his podcast. Not that that would be newsworthy for us to talk about. What was newsworthy was not that he's actually trying to get into the podcast world. I think part of the reason for that is, as we know, that's where a lot of the younger generation is right now. They have bypassed the mainstream media. They're getting their information from other sources like podcasters. So it doesn't surprise us that as a pure political animal that he is, he would be wanting to figure out what's the latest, greatest way to capture the hearts of the next generation, in his case for votes, which they did not do so well this last time around.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious, and I think Charlie Clerk mentioned this. He's running for president in 2028, and Newsom was kind of, well, this is my opinion. He looked at what happened in the last election cycle. He's like, all the people went on Joe Rogan and all these other podcasts won the election. Why don't I appeal myself to the common American and invite Charlie Kirk, of all people, to come on this podcast?
Exactly. The consummate radical firebrand conservative who's speaking, you know, I think I misspoke last podcast that Charlie's not even 30 yet. I checked that fact out. I did our own fact checking. He is 30. He's 31 years old, so he's still very,
baby.
Very young.
Yeah. Young at age, not in maturity, though.
Very young, very articulate. And in fact, reason we're actually doing a second podcast recording now in the same day that our last podcast aired, because next week I'm going to be out of town with our very own Isaac Carr, and we're going to be enjoying a pastor's conference that TPUSA is putting on. So I will have a lot to share with you and with everybody else when I return.
Charlie?
I hope so. I know he's going to be there.
Okay.
But I'd love to run up and just connect with a lot of the folks there. Obviously, what's nice about this is a common DNA pool. You know, it's good to be around people who love the Lord, love the Word of God, love freedom, love America. So I always love, being in that type of an environment. Yeah. But back to Charlie, we covered a couple of things that were amazing about that podcast with Governor Newsom, but we left out one of the major ones. The bigged news item in the election cycle last week was the fact that Governor Newsom flip-flopped on a couple of, pretty major tenets of the Democratic Party. I mean, it was massive news. It didn't get I don't know that it got the media cycle. I think they're downplaying it because it's really almost an attack on their leftist orthodoxy. Mm-hmm. But talk about the flip-flop.
Yeah, I mean, it was a discussion about transgender female. I get all myself. A man playing in a female sport, a women's sport, right? And Charlie Kirk was kind of pushing on that and saying, "Hey, make a declaration right now." And Newsom said, essentially, it's deeply unfair for someone with a biological male DNA play in the female sports, which seems like
I don't know if you saw the picture. One of the pictures that's famous, at least on the internet, is all these little girls, basketball players. They're all like, under 5'5", and on their team is a guy that's like as big as you sitting on my shoulders and me standing. And this guy is massive. His shoulders are as broad as this table. And he's wearing the same uni, like he's one of the team.
Yeah.
And this is a man who is mentally ill and dressed as trying to be a girl on a girls' basketball team, and the size disparity is scary. Like if I was thinking of my daughter actually going out and trying to compete against this man, I'd be like, whoa, time out, you know? So again, this is just like common sense for anybody with a brain who's not ideologically brainwashed. But for a politician in a progressive state, I mean, can you think of a more progressive state than California? I mean, maybe New York with Ty, Illinois is very progressive, Massachusetts, Maine, but I mean, that's like at the top, all right, in terms of influence, size.
Yeah, in terms of basically, California has a supermajority of Democrats, and they basically of liberal policies, they just push that to the nth degree.
Absolutely.
In every front.
Yep.
And for him to make that statement was, I don't really think Gavin Newsom actually changed his mind. I think it's actually a more a measuring of the temperature of what America truly believes, for him to actually admit that it's deeply unfair for that to happen.
Right. So you have to ask the question why, because certainly he's going to have a lot of explaining to do within his own party, but I think we know why. We've talked about this in the last episode. The Democratic Party is a massive dumpster fire right now. There's massive division within the party. All they're doing is ridiculous things that make them even look more out of touch with the average American. Chanting, protests, signs, TikTok videos. I mean, there's no substantive policy challenges to what's taking place right now because as we said in the last podcast, reality is real. It's out there. It's objective. Our job is to conform to reality, not to create an alternative reality. And if you're living in an alternative reality, eventually it hits the fan because it just doesn't work. It's unlivable. It's irrational. And eventually people go, you know what? That's like a bad idea, or that's a really stupid policy because it has really bad outcomes. Maybe it's not right. And I think that's what happened with Newsom. I think he finally came to the conclusion, you know what? If I have any hope of any political future, I've got to come to my senses here and admit the obvious, that men should not be competing in women's sports. And if anybody should get that, it should be a Democrat, as they've prided themselves, right, in being pro-women all these years. Right. But it's here's another sacred violation. I don't know if you saw this, but he was also asked by Charlie Kirk about, is there any room in the Democratic Party for people who are pro-life? And of course, the answer, historically, at least recent history, has been absolutely not. If you are pro-life, you're an outcast in the Democratic Party. There's nothing life-embracing about that platform right now. And Newsom basically conceded on that yes, in other words, he thinks they need to widen the tent to allow people with a little more diverse views to be under there. Well, it's interesting that the party that was supposed to be most inclusive is actually most exclusive, because these are things that if you believe differently, you're not welcome, which to me is ironic, right? The party that prides itself in being open-minded and fair has a whole list of people that they will not allow to be a part of their movement. And so, again, for guys like us, we look at that, we scratch our heads and we go, okay, maybe the party, maybe in smoke-filled rooms behind the scenes, he's going, hey, guys, I really didn't mean it. I'm just saying this because we're getting our brains beat out in public in elections. So I really didn't mean it. I don't know what he's going to do behind closed doors, but it looked like a purely political move on his part.
Well, it's a 4-year journey. It's a marathon for I know Newsom's looking around. Personally, he's probably looking around and says, who's going to run in 2028?
Yeah, it's a great question.
Not Harris.
Yeah.
So he's thinking, I'm the man. I don't know who else would be on top of that ticket. So he's thinking, man, for me to, in 4 years, to be seen like a centralist, I better start now.
Right.
It's a strategic, it might be a very strategic move, but but I'm feeling that most Americans kind of see through that. Now, again, 3-4 years later, maybe we forgot everything.
Well, I just saw too, and I was sharing this with Matthew, there was a whole lot of money and marketing put into Michelle Obama's launch of her podcast. Evidently, she's launching a new weekly podcast. And I'm talking major money, major budget, major marketing. And her maiden voyage show had 40,000 Americans that listened in out of 330 million or however many, probably more than that now. So it was an abysmal disappointment, let's just put it that way, for the money and everything that was invested. So I think the party's looking around going, who in the world can pull us together? And the problem is the progressives in that party have so skewed the positions that they're unpalatable to the large majority of Americans, whether you're a Republican, Democrat, Independent, or whatever you are. It's just unpalatable positions.
Yeah, and for anyone who thinks we just swing back and forth, 4 years later the liberals are in charge, I want to remind people that the last 4 years, it wasn't just a swing. Everything was in the favor of the Democrats. All the money, all the media, all the money from USAID, governmental money is going in one direction.
All these NGOs were political activist groups who were pushing ideology, not only at home but abroad.
I think Harris outraised Trump by $1 billion, but that was just a campaign contribution. That's not including all the in-kind contribution through media and movie stars and the push of the whole basically elite world.
Yep.
And none of that could overcome the truth, because in the day the truth shines through. So I think these Democrats are doing what they can in 4 years to pivot themselves, and they're doing it right now. That's a strategic move. I get that. But if they don't pivot to the truth, which I think they're attempting to, but it's not going to work, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's going to have to be some wholesale, evaluation of these positions. And it's hard, though, when you're in your own little echo chamber. It's hard. It's hard to believe what the data is showing. It's hard to believe, what the exit polls revealed or whatever. Sometimes the truth is hard to swallow.
Well, that's a great point. Even that was very, very difficult because, if you follow the mainstream polls in the last election cycle, you think Harris is going to win by a landslide.
Sure, that's what the media portrayed, yep.
But these are all scientific polls. But again, even that doesn't tell you. So you talk about the echo chamber. The polls are part of the echo chamber. The polls should be objective truth.
Yep.
Should be. It's certainly not now. There were 2 or 3 polls. The Rasmussen, Atlas Intel, a couple of those were just on top of it. And
this brings us to a really great worldview point that we can make right now. I heard a wise person share a proverb one time that said, if you want to know what water is, don't ask the fish. Because the fish are in the echo chamber. All fish know is water, so they don't have anything to compare it to. That's their whole world, which is why, from a worldview perspective, if you want to understand truth, if you want to know truth, if you want to experience objective truth, that truth must come from outside of us. In other words, the truth has to come outside of a human source. Mm-hmm. Because if it's just my opinion versus your opinion, a Democrat versus a Republican, an independent, a progressive, a liberal, a conservative, that's not the bastion of truth. Truth must come by revelation. It must come by somebody who's not a human being to tell humans who they are, how they're supposed to live, what the purpose of life is, what's morality. Otherwise, if it stays within the realm of the fish, all you're going to have is opinions, which is why, again, the biblical worldview is so important, because we have a God who has chosen to speak. We have a God who chosen to reveal himself, to reveal his heart, to speak about moral issues. And so our job is to not spit into the wind, to have our opinions fly back in our face. If the wind's blowing in our face, it's really wise to turn around and head the other direction, or at least to acknowledge the presence of wind. Yeah. But when you reject God, you suppress the truth, as Romans 1 says, then you just continue to stubbornly resist the obvious, and you get a lot of spit back in your face, to use that illustration. So here's a great example. I thought our president came out and did something incredibly bold. It seems so radical, and yet it's so common sense. Sensical, all right? And that was simply to say, there's 2 genders. This has been the way it's been for millennia. Well, where did that come from? It came from God. It came from the creation order. So again, that's reality. So recently, just this past week, there was a congressional subcommittee hearing where we had a lot of sparks flying. Evidently, the ranking member of the Republican Bill Keating, after ranking member Republican Bill Keating raised his voice at Representative Keith Self for correctly introducing trans-identifying Representative Sarah McBride, who's a Democrat from the state of Delaware, as a man, the fireworks started erupting. Now, he introduced Representative McBride as Mr. That's because that's what he is. He is a Mr. He is a biological male who's wearing a skirt and makeup and appearing to dress like a woman, but he's not a woman. And so we get into this issue, and a lot of our folks have had to ask questions about gay marriage. Should we attend? Do we use a person's name, opposite gender name, or do we call them their given name? And this gets in probably to a lot of nuance that we don't want to get into, at least during this podcast. That's not the focus of the podcast. But my point is simply this, if somebody wants to be called, a man wants to be called by a woman's name, that's their prerogative. If they want to live in that alternate universe, they can. But to make the rest of the universe jump into that false narrative is irrational, illogical, unhealthy. And this is not like a game we're playing. Let's all pretend to be whatever gender we want to be. Let's all come up with the name that we want, but that's not our given name. Let's be a gender that is not our given gender. This isn't like a video game. This isn't a movie where everybody has to pretend to be in your little world. This is like Congress. All right, these are the people that pass laws. These are the people that protect our nation. This is the business of our country, and we should not be engaging in this type of mentally ill irrationality. This is like not in touch with reality behavior. It's shocking at this point only because we played along with this charade for the last 4 years under the Biden administration, and where we actually punish people, censure people, cancel people who simply refuse to not play the game. And so on the one hand, I can understand where this representative would feel uncomfortable, but they should be feeling uncomfortable. Like, what you're doing makes all of us feel uncomfortable. So stop it. You're not living in reality. And just because you want to be a woman, you can't be a woman. You're a man. So you need to deal with that. That's an issue. You need to deal with that. But you shouldn't expect all of Congress to play that type of charade. So of course there's going to be fireworks, and I'm not sure where this is going to end. Because they'll probably try to milk this as much as they can. But it was interesting in this particular encounter, that Democrat, high-ranking Democrat, had no further comment. All right, he said the video speaks for itself. Well, I think they were actually backpedaling because they really don't want to go into this because there's no argument there. The argument's already lost in the public arena. Most Americans have had it up to here with playing that game, and I think the representative realized, I don't want to go on record going into some lengthy debate where we should call this man by a Mrs. name and call this man Sarah, all right? I don't think they have a worldview leg to stand on. The argument is a poor argument, and it's not a winning argument. So I think they're distancing themselves from it.
It's a religious argument. It's based on my religion. Male and female is determined not by your biology, but by your feelings.
Yep.
Like, that's a religious argument. And they can come back and say, hey, your religious argument is your gender is determined by your biology. I'll own up to it. Yes, my Christianity faith tells me that my gender is determined not by my feelings, but by biology. We have two religious arguments, but I think what we can argue is let's look at the impact of your religion. Let's look at the impact. So, for example, male and female sports. So the impact of my religion says it's a fair playing ground. The impact of your religion says, by your own Democratic governor, says is very unfair.
So right? How about the other argument that this all got started when one of the female representatives said, I do not want this man using the women's restrooms. Hello, of course not. If you're a woman, that's a private space. You don't want a man, even a confused man, even a man who thinks he's a woman, coming into that bathroom. Well, that created sparks.
Right.
But again, so it's like, okay, well, who are we siding with here? Well, I tend to think we should stick with several millennia of history where they weren't confused about men and women.
I guess my other question also is like, if your religion says, again, I'm using the word religion because they're all basically your worldview, your presupposition, is that your gender is determined by your feelings. How about your race?
Yeah.
Now you can dive into, are you a minority or not? Because we have history of people who identify as a African American when they're not. So now we open those doors.
Because of all the DEI, special funding.
Yeah.
I mean, like, the only way I'm going to get into an Ivy League school today as a white man is if I identify as a black woman or as an Indian, whatever.
I don't think Asians are very favored in those colleges now anyways.
Well, you guys get in because you're smart and you work hard. That's how you guys get in. But like for me, how do I get in? And that's the reality of it.
Right.
Like if I want to be a different race, then why can't I? Why would you not consider my authentic self?
Well, I think that's the issue. It's like if your religion says your genders or your sex, even the gender, whatever, is determined by your feelings, then I would say, well, does your religion also promote other things that's transmutable by your feelings? Because my religion says no. To any of that, biology determines your race, your sex, and several other things.
Absolutely.
And your species, like you can't just be a cat because you feel like a cat. Because there's people who do stuff like that too.
Absolutely, but how do you address that argument? I sincerely believe that I'm a platypus. Great, I'm supposed to.
But that's a genuine, again, without being condescending, that's a genuine question about your worldview to say, well, if you can change based on your feelings, what else? How can you say your gender can be changed by your feelings, but not other things?
If you sincerely feel
if I sincerely feel like I'm black, does that, based on your religion, do I get to be that? Is that something that everyone needs to acknowledge? Does that change my legal paperwork? Does that change my funding?
Yeah, so again, we get into livability. Like you should be able to live in the world that corresponds to reality. So here you are on the airplane, and someone's trying to serve you a soft drink and some peanuts, and they misgender you, like they're supposed to know. Sometimes you don't even know because of the way a person is dressed. And then you see these all the time, these videos, someone stands up and goes irate and goes off on you. How dare you? Who do you think you are? Misgendering me. And they're like, hey, look, I'm just trying to give you a Diet Coke and a bag of peanuts, for crying out loud. I had no idea I misgendered you. But it becomes a place then where you have the basis to sue people, to get people fired, to call people names, and even to have a violent reaction against these people.
Well, that's why you need name tags with your pronouns. That's why you have on your profile, on your Facebook profile, you have to help clarify to other people what that is. But again, it could be changed. That costs complexity, and now you're like non-identifying. So there's another one that comes up. Again, it goes and grows, and it gets more and more complicated. And
because it's not true. Because it's a falsehood. It's a false narrative, and therefore it's unlivable, therefore it's irrational, therefore we need to be done with it. So I applaud Congress that we're not going to play these games anymore. And if you want to play that game, that's fine, but we're not going to misgender you based upon your feelings. We're going to call you what you are biologically.
Well, that's exactly the point. Your religion says you can change your feeling, but my religion says you can't. So when I have to call you something, you feel oppressed, but I feel like my religion is oppressed. So whose religion? I mean, again, it opens up all kinds of discussions.
So it's just so much easier to live, is it not, with men and women, and not an infinite number of possible genders that we all have to learn to make that person happy. That's my simple opinion. I mean, it's worked pretty well for several hundred years in American history.
Keep
anyway.
it simple. Now
here's something else I love, which is, and I just want to say this. Everything that we're talking about is controversial, and the reason it's controversial is because it matters. People shouldn't shy away from controversy. Controversy is an indication that what you're talking about is actually important. And so here's another example. President Donald Trump sent a clear message to public universities on Monday: stamp out anti-Semitic behavior on campus or kiss federal funding goodbye. And as a result, at least 60 universities now find themselves in the hot waters of federal investigation for anti-Semitic discrimination and harassment. Now, we remember before Trump was elected, there was all these crazy campus protests going on. And I draw the line on protests. There's a place for protests. It's protected under the First Amendment. Peaceful protest. But when you're shutting down the university, when you physically take over buildings, when you threaten the lives of other students, when you damage public property, and this is all paid for by taxpayers. These universities, in addition to massive endowments that they're sitting on, they're getting tax dollars to basically poison the minds of U.S. students to hate America, to hate their race, to be a victim, and then to celebrate groups like Hamas, who came in unprovoked and slaughtered over 1,000 Israeli folks, raped Israeli women, mutilated their bodies, took men, women, and children as hostages. And we have these folks, especially Colombia was one of the most notorious places where they literally shut down the educational system, damaged all kinds of property, did this in the name of protest, set up a camp with their Palestinian flags, and basically just violated the law over and over and over again. And the university could not perform its mission. All right, at that point, no one is learning because there's so much chaos on campus. So this is another common sense idea. This was a comment from the Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon. The department is deeply disappointed that Jewish students studying on elite U.S. campuses continue to fear for their safety amid the relentless anti-Semitic eruptions that have severely disrupted campus life for more than a year. And so what do? They called these presidents in before Congress, and they grilled them. What are you guys doing? Why are you allowing this to go on? Why don't you shut this down? Well, it turns out that the reason a lot of this was not shut down is because the president supported. Many of the university professors were ringleaders. And so, again, there was no leadership on the issue. So it's not going to be shut down. I think one of them resigned or lost their job. But it was an embarrassment that these folks could not categorically say that what Hamas did was morally repugnant and evil, which is just is straightforward. I mean, you watch the horrific video. My heart was broken to see what happened to these innocent people, men, women, children, slaughtered, and to not be able to just condemn it straightforwardly. This is evil. Shows you how morally bankrupt our public universities have become. This is the result of moral relativism. This is the result of somehow trying to assume that you can be religiously neutral or not religious at all. You end up, as C.S. Lewis said, raising up men without chest. You have people who are highly educated in their heads, but they're absolutely depraved. And that's a scary place to be. And so this is another, I'm just incredibly excited that Columbia is going to lose $400 million in federal funding, but this is grievous. So they caught the ringleader, a guy by the name of Mahmoud Khalil, an anti-Israel activist who attended the university on a green card. So they caught this guy. They knew he was the ringleader, and we're getting ready to deport him. And a federal judge says that you can't do that. It's a violation of his rights. This is a U.S. district judge. So there's another hearing coming up. But this is interesting to me. The New York Civil Liberty Union said this was an extreme attack on his First Amendment rights. This guy's not even a citizen of the United States. You do not have rights under our Constitution as a non-citizen. And I love Tom Homan. I love what he said. The borders are. He asked this question. This guy, by the way, is so full of common sense, it's refreshing, isn't he? Every time he opens his mouth, I'm just like,
he just doesn't care.
He said, here's what he said. Did this guy violate the terms of his visa? The answer is yes. Did he violate the terms of his residency here? The answer is absolutely. You know, he says, committing crimes attacking Israeli students, locking down buildings, destroying property. Any resident alien who commits a crime is eligible for deportation. And I love this. This is what people who love America just say, amen. Thank you for somebody with common sense. This is what he said. It is a great privilege to be a student in America. And when we give you that right to study in this country, don't violate our laws. And so Senator our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, confirmed over the weekend that the Trump administration will revoke green cards and visas of Hamas supporters in America so they can be deported. This is so refreshing. Why in the world? I'm just going to ask a really basic common sense question. Why in the world would we allow people into this country who hate America?
Because you hate America yourself. That's why you allow them to come.
Voila. Wow. Yeah, I mean, apart from that answer,
yeah.
What other answer is there? You have people here who hate this country. You see them waving their flags. I'm like, you want
to destroy you from within.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If you come to this country and you're waving the flag of where you came from, you're not acting like an American. I don't have a problem with us appreciating. I mean, I come from Germany, all right? You come from China. We're not saying you hate your country of origin or where your parents or their parents came from. But the point is, when you become an American citizen, again, these folks aren't, but if you're desiring to be a part of the American dream, I want you to love America, and I want you to love the American flag more than your country of origin or your country that flat out calls death to America. And then you come here chanting the same cheers on our streets and our universities. Like, why are you even here for 1 second? We should be shipping these folks out instantly when this happens, because they're violating the purpose of their alien resident status. All right. And what I found out interesting, the Columbia University is full of people. At least half the student body is from a country, I would say, that actually overtly hates the United States of America. So they're here as a privilege, and then when they're being reinforced in their hatred and in their anti-Semitic hatred in their classroom by their professors, I say ship the professor out too. What are you doing teaching at an American university and propagating such vile hatred for the country that allows you to be here and to be blessed here and to work here and to prosper here? It's mind-boggling to me. So how in the world a judge could stop the deportation of somebody who's leading criminal acts and threatening the lives of other students? How in the world there's any question over why this person is still here is mind-boggling to me. And these are judges, these liberal, leftist, progressive, many times Soros-appointed or funded judges that we need to get rid of. I don't know what the process is for that.
Yeah, I don't know the whole process behind that. I feel like these judges are just like, they're just kind of like, they can just say whatever they want at this point. And they can halt some process. And they might get overruled. The line between the judicial and legislative and executive branch is really blurred to me right now.
Oh, absolutely. Because here's the argument. I brought this up before. Right now in America, I think the most powerful branch of government is the judiciary, because they actually think they have the power to call an act of Congress unconstitutional or call an executive action of the president unconstitutional. And at times they should. I mean, if it's an egregious act, that's where the judges come in. But the judges should be going to case law. They should be able to go back and say, this is why. And sometimes you just wonder, where are you getting this from? You know?
Someone brought up the impeachment of judges. And like, we haven't impeached judges in long or whatever. We absolutely have. Everyone needs to be held accountable.
But to your point, it is very blurry right now, because so let's just say I say, well, I'm not going to obey what Judge Ming just passed down because it's a bunch of baloney. Now, this has happened before in American history where presidents have disregarded,
right.
But you better have good reason for that. Otherwise, it just creates absolute chaos, right?
Well, it sets a precedents for, again, chaos, right? For the nation to come down. So I don't recommend people define judges, but at the same time, if the judge have no restraint and they just do whatever they want, it's World War III in America.
Absolutely. And we talked about this before, like this, the Roe v. Wade ruling, absolute judicial activism. There's nowhere in the Constitution that gives you the right to promote abortion on demand, but that was made out of thin air, right. and there was no court cases supporting that because abortion was illegal in every state. I think except one or two at the time, but that had been the history of abortion in America. So this is pure activism. So at some point, as you pointed out, where do we hold the judges accountable? Yeah. And that's a hard question. This is why. So what holds the judicial branch, the executive branch, and the congressional? Legislative branch. What holds them all together if not a shared worldview?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, we all have to be playing by like the same moral code, or else everything gets tangled and eventually falls apart. The republic collapses. And as our founders have said, it's not going to collapse from the outside. It's going to collapse from a lack of virtue and morality from within. And I think that's what we're witnessing, a clear divide in the road right now. Yeah. Whether or not you believe in male and female, or you believe that your feelings can make you whatever you want to be. I mean, that's how broad this thing has become. Whether you believe a baby in the mother's womb is a human being, or whether you believe it's a clump of cells that you can discard anytime you feel like it during the course of 9 months of pregnancy. I mean, this is what happens when you reject God and you reject the scriptures as a common, unifying source of truth that creates an environment where we all play by, at least generally, the same understanding of the rules. Obviously, there's room on certain things for us to disagree or to have some good argument, but on the main things, the Bible is very, very clear. Yeah. And thus, we have to return to God first and to the scriptures if we're going to see our nation survive long term. All right. Next week, I will be bringing you a live report from the conference. We should have a lot of cutting edge things to talk about. Yeah. And I'm looking forward to tell you that I got to meet lots of amazing people.
I want to know how TPE USA is looking to take over for the midterms.
Come on. Well, I hope to have some answers for you. And hopefully we'll have some of those amazing folks that will make their way through here, be a part of our public square events, and be able to speak to the people in our community. So anyway, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We love and appreciate you. Have a tremendous day.